Okay, let's start. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to play a simulated game of 3 players playing 1835. I will go through a little bit of the rules, a little bit of the interface, but mostly I will focus on explaining the strategical choices that any of the 3 players here are taking in order to highlight the depth of this game when you really know how to play it. The game starts with the start round, and first let me introduce you to the private and the minor companies, and I will give you my opinion based on 25 years of playing, what the quality and the strength of these are. These are my opinions. It might vary between player and player. The best paper arguably is the M1, because it sits at a very profitable place on the map and it develops building power across the whole of the southwest of the map. The second best is the M5, situated in Berlin. This is a fantastic paper if you're planning on playing the Saxon. The M5 is the only paper that can more or less guarantee that the Saxony actually reaches Berlin later in the game. The danger is that if other players want to keep it out, they sometimes are able to, and that is the definite end of the game for the Saxony director. The next best paper might be the M3, which sits also on top of the Saxony and to Berlin. It depends a bit on the connections and the other papers that a player has, but in general the M3 has a route to Hamburg and it's also very good to support the Saxony. The best route in the game is between the M3 and the M2, but very rarely this connection is allowed. Players should avoid allowing that another player has both of these papers. After that, we probably have the M6. This is a useful paper to be able to build up in the north of the map, but it's also simply the highest earning company because it will immediately earn the 40 from Hamburg and 20, so 60 income, which is the most profitable company. All of these minor companies are inherently better than most or any of the other papers, simply for the fact that they have building power, so they can influence the later game, and they also earn a fair bit of income, but crucially they earn their own income that we will later extract for a major company, which will allow us to buy trains. I haven't talked about the M4. The M4 is the weakest of the minor companies, simply for the fact that it is the most expensive one. It is able to buy two trains, but it can only run them to 10 stations left and right, and that is not very effective. However, of course, in connection with others, specifically the M1 and M4 connection and combination is extremely powerful, because if you have the M1 and M4, you really dominate this area, which is one of the most crucial areas of the net, and you can determine very often if the Baden paper, the Baden company, actually has a route later on or not. Let's come to the Bavaria papers, and we've got 3 of those. We got the Nürnberg-Fürth, the Ostbayern and the Pfalzbahn. In that order, the best paper of these easily is the Nürnberg-Fürth, because not only it comes with a Bavaria share and it pays 5, which is not why it is so good, but it gives you the possibility later on to set a marker on one of these 2 spaces, which is a get out of the jail card for free, especially for the Baden player, because sometimes the Baden will be locked in, and then having this paper is a lifeline. This in itself makes it probably the best paper outside of the minor companies. The Ostbayern has the building power on both of these tiles, which is nice but not decisive for the rest of the game. So it is consider to be a weaker paper. The Pfalzbahn is a very interesting paper. It's quite expensive. It pays 15 though, but it allows you to build a tile here in the green and allows you to lay a marker down. Having this paper is potentially very useful for the Baden director because it allows them to break free with the one extra building power that they have, and that is good. It is not so useful for any other company other than to harm the Baden. The next paper is the Leipzig-Dresdner, which I forgot, which actually is a very good paper. It pays 20 revenue, but probably only 2, maybe 3 times in the game, but it comes with the Saxony director. Now, the Saxony director can be a pathway for winning the game, but it must be supported by another company, either the M3 or better, the M5. The Braunschweig and Hanover are the weakest of these papers. These come with a 10% Prussia share each, and they pay 25 and 30, but they are strategically of very little relevance in the beginning of the game and only count to the final Prussia president. These are usually the papers that are picked later. However, if you are interested in becoming the Prussia director very early on, then these papers are useful. Okay, let's start the game. I push this over so that we have maximum ability to see what's happening on the map. So, the preferred move of Charlie at the first player is probably taking the M5 with the view of getting the Saxony later. Typical move for Bob in this situation would be to take the M1. As I said, these two companies are easily the best in the game. However, Bob might hesitate to do that because he now opened the way for Alice to buy the M2 and the M3 in the same go. That is the strongest combination on the board and will lead to very early income for Alice. It will also lead to Saxony being less developed because the crucial connection between Berlin and Hamburg will not come early, if at all. Bob has the M1 and wants to do the connection between the M1 and M4. He knows that this is a powerful combination. Charlie will take the M6 as the last remaining minor company. Alice now has the decision to make if she wants to become Prussia president or Bavaria president or Saxony president at this stage. But the traditional way, because she owns the M2 in this case, is actually to go for a higher Prussia share. So she would take the Braunschweig, which pays 25, but it costs 30 less than the Hanover. So that would give her now in total 25%. Bob has 15 and Charlie has 10% of the Prussia. Alice also has a fixed income of 25, which shields her a little bit from the pressure of keeping the round alive, because the minor companies only pay out if all shares of the Bavaria here are sold. So there is an interest of people that have less fixed income to open the Bavaria. Now Bob wants to do that, of course, so he will buy one of the Bavaria shares, and the best one of these on offer is the Nürnberg. Charlie has not so much interest in the Bavaria, he has an interest in the Leipzig-Dresdner, so he will take that. So let's stop and have a look at the income. Alice has 25, Bob has 5, Charlie has 20, so if the round stops now, Bob has a massive disadvantage, and Alice would have 5 more income. He will take one of the Bavaria papers. This is an interesting choice. He could take the Ostbayern, but this is useless for the Saxony. He could also take the Bayern Director, which is very powerful because the Saxony will open very soon. So therefore he's going to choose this. Alice is the director of the Prussia. She has no interest in the Bavaria either. And she's thinking to herself that she rather wants to become the president, the director of the Prussia early on in the game, for sure. And also she can now see that nobody has 120 for the Ostbayern, and she already has the highest fixed income. So what she's going to do is buy the Hanover. Now what happens is that the rest of the round everybody has to pass, because nobody's got the money to buy the Ostbayern, and therefore the Bavaria wasn't sold out, and therefore the minor companies were not allowed to act, which means the only thing that happened in that round is the fixed income was paid, and this is of course 35 better for Alice than for everybody else. And now we join the start round again after that. The 20 fixed income has allowed Bob, though, to get over the threshold. And as the Bavaria president, he has a really high interest of getting the Ostbayern, and therefore will buy it. We now start the short stock round. After the start round, Charlie cannot do anything with 86, so will pass. Alice could buy a Bavaria or a Saxony, but chooses not to do anything right now, because nothing will pay out. And Bob cannot do anything, so we join the first operating round. But let's review very quickly the strategies, because 3 very dominant strategies have emerged now. Alice is obviously playing the Prussia strategy. Bob is playing the Bavaria strategy. He has 3 papers that help the Bavaria. Charlie is playing the Saxony strategy, and he has already 20% Bavaria to sell. So he can open the Saxony in the next round, which is an extremely early start. But let's play the first operating round first. So M1 is looking around and sees that the M4 obviously is one of the papers, and the Bavaria as well, and this seems to be a long distance, but it turns out that this is actually a very strong connection between the M1 and the Bavaria, and therefore he builds the tile like that. He will buy 1 train, and it is finished. The M2 looks around and sees that she also has the M3, so Alice will do the obvious thing and connect these 2, and she will buy only 1 train, because only 1 train can run. The M3 has no interest in the Saxony, but a very high interest of getting to Berlin, so will lay a tile that allows the M2 to connect to the M3, and next round immediately to go for a lot of income, and the other exit will go to Hamburg. And we will buy 1 train. Be done. The M4 knows that the M1 is friendly, so we'll be able to run 2 trains immediately, which is quite strong, and therefore we'll buy 2 trains and build a straight. The M5, of course, wants to help the Saxony, so will not go for the higher paying Ostpreußen here, but will go for the 10 station, because this is very beneficial for the Saxony later. The M6 doesn't really have much choice. It will just build a straight so that it can go for 60 next round. Right, the Bavaria is connected to the M1 and M4, so it wants to build up there. Now here are several strategies that are possible. Bob in this situation has the Ostbayern, so he can build 3 tiles. I should mention that in this situation there is no way for Bob to actually dump the presidency on Charlie. Charlie has 20%, so in theory, if the deal was with Bob, Bob could now buy a little, I'll demonstrate this, a little Bavaria. So now it's Bavaria's turn. Bavaria is looking around and sees that it is connected to the M1 and the M4. But first, just to illustrate something that does happen in some games, the situation with the Bavaria shares is that Bob has 30 and Charlie has 20. So Charlie is in danger of getting a dumped presidency. Bob could, in theory, do this in a mean way, which is called the Little Bavaria Circle, and then buy a lot of trains, dump the presidency, and open the Saxon in the next round. However, because the priority deal is with Charlie at the moment, Bob obviously cannot do that, and he has such a good portfolio of Bavaria shares that it wouldn't be in his interest anyway. So let's not do that. We're going back, and we're playing constructive. The constructive way of opening the Bavaria in this situation could look like that, with a direct route to Nürnberg in the first instance. We do not need to lay the marker right yet, but this gives us 1 tempo advantage. So we don't need to skip that, and we can run for 2 trains next round. So the Bavaria will buy 2 trains. Actually, it will buy 3 trains because it's already looking, because Bob at this stage does not know if Charlie wants to open the Saxony, in which case the Saxony might be ahead of him, because if the Bavaria now drops twice, no, actually only drops once, then the Saxony will be ahead, and then there might not be many 2+2s left. So because of that, he will actually buy 2 2+2 trains. Because he needs a train for the M1, of course, as well. Right, that's the end of the first operating round. It's Charlie's turn, and Charlie will indeed decide to dump the Bavaria, and he will do that in 2 stages because he's got the money in order to drop the Bavaria as much as possible. So he will sell 1 and buy a Saxony. Alice is happy because she can pick up the cheaper Bavaria. Bob is out of options and must pass. Charlie is selling the second one. Bavaria drops behind the Saxony. He's buying 40%. Alice can pick up the second Bavaria share. Bob has to pass, and Charlie can open the Saxony. Alice wants to pass, and happy with her 20%. Bob needs to pass, and Charlie is passing as well, which brings us to the second round. Now, as I said, the M1 and the M4 is a strong combination because they can build together. And a typical way to do that is like that, so that the M4 can potentially build Cologne for the M1 later in the game. M3 is building towards Bavaria, towards Hamburg. F6 often builds towards Hanover, with the idea of potentially going back to itself, so have a better train track for the 2 train. Remember, the M4 has two trains which are not optimally driven at this stage. Now the Saxony is ahead of the Bavaria. It can do mean things now. First of all, it definitely wants to go to Berlin. And the second path, it really wants to connect to Dresden. This situation, the Saxony, is very, very early. There's actually no earlier way of opening the Saxony. Therefore, Charlie thinks that he will not make it green this round, because as you can see, there are two 2+2 trains, and the next train was the tree, which means that in the next round the Saxony can only build one yellow tile, but there is still a lot to build at the moment, and therefore Saxony will take the decision of not buying the 3 train right now. Instead, he will build towards the M5 with a view of having a connection to Leipzig, Dresden, and a connection to Berlin in the next round. He is, however, guaranteed to get a connection to Berlin, because the M5 will build this and the Saxony will build this. And buying the 3 train now will hamper the Bavaria for a good stage. But he's deciding to be friendly and skip the buy in order to build himself a better connection. Bavaria will now go up towards Frankfurt in big steps. And in order to run as many trains as possible, we'll go to put down a marker, pay out, and that concludes the turn. So Alice now has a priority deal, and this is a fairly straightforward round, because everybody will go for the papers that will generate the highest income. Everybody passes. Now the next round, it is still yellow. M1 builds now the big arch towards Bavaria. M2 cannot do anything and will pass. M3 will build towards Hamburg. M4 will continue its journey towards Hanover. M5 does the important connection to the Saxony. M6 builds towards Hamburg. And now the Bavaria is of course ahead of the Saxony, so it can rescue itself and build towards Frankfurt. By the way, it decides not to use the Ostbayern power yet, because it still pays 10 income, so there's no need to close that. It is, however, important to remember later on, when we're close to the share limit, the certificate limit, to close it just in time, so that we can buy a better paper instead of it, but we'll keep it for the moment. So an interesting decision is where to put the second marker of the Bavaria. Frankfurt is a very good place, because we've got 4 trains, and this is the only way how to actually run our 4 trains right now, and this is why Bob decides to do that. And of course he will pay out, which pays handsomely to the shareholders. Now Saxony will build a connection to Berlin, and with the second go will go towards Dresden. Pay out, of course, and now buy one more train, and it is now green. And in the next stock round, Charlie wants to have some fun first and will drop the Bavaria by 1 space because he can still buy a Saxon later. Now Alice is happy to pick up this because 88 is less than 92, so she will buy the used share. Bob remains president with 50%. Charlie buys Saxony. Now Alice has a choice to make. Does she wants to have the 50% Bavaria share, or the potentially better revenue Saxony, or to punish the Saxony? And as I said earlier, Alice is the Prussia president, so she has a real interest that all other companies are weak in their share value, and that this Prussia opens as early as possible. So what she's actually going to do is to buy the share of the Saxony and dropping it immediately. No, that was a silly move. We're going back. Let's rethink that. If she's buying and dumping the share of the Saxony, she doesn't get another paper this round, and this round is quite crucial in the game because it will be followed by 2 operating rounds, and therefore she wants as many paying papers as possible. So she will just buy the 50 Bavaria share. Bob has not many options. There's 1 Saxony left. And now everybody is out of money. And we'll continue the round. Bob now has 2 options. He can either go and drive more himself by upgrading Düsseldorf, which pays 10 more, or he will help the Bavaria to get quicker into that area of high paying, but he will decide at this stage that he wants to go much more now, so he will pay the 50 right now, which gives him 65, and of course he needs a second train. In fact, the best train that the M1 can have is a 2+2 from the Bavaria, but he's got the chance to actually also buy the M4 train, so that the M4 can then buy the M2 train. So he will buy the M4, the 2 train from the M4 for 15, Y15. So he's got 50 left to buy either Cologne next round or Essen-Duisburg up here. The M2 as Alice. Of course, the one important track that she wants to build is Berlin, and there's only one choice to make, namely where there is no connection. And in order to be as mean as possible to the Saxony, she will choose to leave this empty, because this is a very good connection between the Berlin and Dresden that everybody wants to go, but she's deciding to be mean this time. So Alice has a problem with trains because she's the only one of the 3 that hasn't got a large company where to buy trains from. So she must somehow generate more trains. The only way to do that is to buy trains from each other. So she will choose to buy the 2 train for all money from the M3, which gives the M3 enough money to buy the 3 train. The M3 now has a choice to make. Does it want to upgrade itself? It doesn't need to at the moment because it hasn't got a train, so it won't actually affect the revenue. But potentially this is an interesting build for the Saxony. So in order to be as mean as possible to the Saxony, it will upgrade herself in a way that will not allow the Saxony to go through. So a standard build here would be the 205, because it allows her later to go via Hanover into southwest of the map. And the building to the connection to Hamburg she can still do later next round. But she needs a train, of course. She'll buy the 3 train from the bank. This is important, of course, as well, because this 3 train from the bank will be the one that will go into the Prussia, so that the Prussia will be guaranteed to have a train when it opens later. The M4 will upgrade itself, and it will always want this tile that the M3 just put down, and this is always the same, and therefore the M3 and the M4 usually chooses this tile, number 14, which has a disadvantage that it cannot be upgraded, and it's the second disadvantage, which is more grave, is that everybody else can go through it as well. But it is the best tile to put down because the M4 really needs the connection to Essen. They only got one train, so it wants to buy a train now, and of course we're buying a train from the Bavaria, and we're buying that for 45, so that we can also buy next, we can build a tile next round. The M5 wants to help the Saxony, and there are plenty of ways of doing that. It cannot buy Dresden because it can't reach it. It cannot build Dresden. It probably wants to enable the Saxony, which will have a marker in Berlin in a second, to go to Hamburg, which is the strongest connection other than Dresden. So it must build a second connection. Let's build F18 with a view of having a second track between Leipzig, Dresden and Berlin. And of course it wants to get a nice train from the Saxony, and this one is usually the 2+2, and there's no need to retain any money, so it will go for all the money. The M6 just wants to have the most income. The M6 does not need a second train because it's the only minor company that doesn't have the option for a second track, and therefore it rather keeps the train in the Saxony and carries on with the 1-2 train and the one connection. Now it's Bavaria's turn. Bavaria has only 3 trains at this stage, which it can easily have good connections for. It could upgrade Munich, but that's only temporary. The strategic decision now is to go west. And there are 2 ways, because it's got the Pfalzbahn, it could actually go down to L6. But this is risky because nobody knows at this stage who the Baden president will be, so it keeps itself the options open. It will rather build J6, traditionally in a way that is destructive for the southern exits, so that it can go west from here. It has 2 more building options here now, but it chooses not to do them yet. We don't need a marker. And I will buy a new train from the bank. Now, if you look closely, Bob has all companies that he owns, the Bavaria, the M4 and the M1, are full, so they cannot buy another train. This is potentially dangerous because it is essential to have 1 slot for a train somewhere when the first 4 is bought, so when the Bavaria opens, the Prussia opens, and the players are rushing to get the money out of the minor companies. To have no space is dangerous, but in a 3-player game it is almost certain that Bob gets one of the middle companies, Baden-Württemberg and Hessen, and therefore will generate slots for that purpose. In a 4-player game, I would not recommend buying the last train now, although it's better for the income, of course, but it's not good for evacuating the money out of the minor companies. Right, Saxony, the first proper move, wants to connect to Berlin and build another track. Builds the all-important marker in Berlin, which will go all the 3 trains that the 2 trains will go from here at the moment. You can see that the all-important route from Berlin to Hamburg doesn't exist for the Saxony, which is a major disadvantage at this stage. Saxony should actually go 180, but is only going for 150. But to help a little bit, it's going to buy one train, and it cannot afford any more train. The next train here is already the 3+3 train. The M1 decides is important that the Bavaria has a good track connections later on, and it also wants to build, of course, the second good track for the 2 train. And we'll go for 120. It is at the moment the highest grossing company of the miners. The M2 has no interest in that the Saxony will go a lot, so she will definitely not build G19, but it's also impossible to actually stop that, because every tile that she could build on here would be a tile that the M5 could rectify, so she chooses not to do that. So she thinks what is the best tile to annoy the Saxony, and that is actually, believe it or not, to upgrade the Saxony home tile, but with a tile that is not upgradable later on and has no exit to the bottom, so she will do that. The M5 now can connect Leipzig and Berlin, Dresden and Berlin, apologies. And the M6 still wants to help the Saxony, so now it's got time and money, so it will start building the second connection, or the first connection between Hamburg and Berlin. The Bavaria will connect itself to Dusseldorf, because that is just the tile that will give us the highest income. Saxony will upgrade Dresden for best income, and will now pay 290. This could be higher if there was a connection between Hamburg and Berlin. Right, stock round. This was the all-important stock round to generate income. So all players are sitting now around 500, which of course is enough to open one of the next layer companies, which is the magical number here is 420. But first we need to sell the Saxony shares. Charlie has no decision to make. He just wants 70% of that. Alice is also very easy about that, because it's not the last one. But Bob has the decision to make, because he will decide now who will be offered the Baden presidency. The thinking here is not only who has the Baden presidency, but who actually is able to get the Baden off the ground, because the Baden is not connected very well. The only person who can really run it well is Alice. Charlie might struggle with that, because the Saxony and the 5 and the 6 are very far away. So therefore he thinks it's actually quite funny to offer it, thinking that in a peaceful game, if Charlie buys the Baden, then Alice gets the Württemberg and Bob gets the Hessen, which is very attractive. But let's see if that happens like this in this case. So, Charlie gets the Baden offered and thinks to himself, do I want to open that, or is it a poison chalice? He actually thinks it is a poison chalice and will pass. In a 4-player game, this pass would be potentially devastating, and I guess that Charlie would, in a 4-player game, take the risk, because otherwise there won't be another opportunity to get one of the middle companies very often. But in a 3-player game, there's a bit of luxury to carry on. Alice is now conflicted. On the one hand, she does want the Baden presidency, because it is not quite clear what else she otherwise would get. But however, she knows exactly, like Charlie, that Bob is in command if the Baden will become a successful or not successful company. So this is a risky move, and a player will think about that for a long time. But in this game, she also will decide to pass this poison chalice. Bob now has the liberty and the luxury to decide where the game is going. If Bob's at this moment thinks that the game is going really well for him and he's making the most income, because he's got 2 companies with 2 trains and 50% of the Bavaria, which also pays handsomely, then he has the choice now to finish that stock round. However, I don't think that Bob is the highest earning player, and therefore he will indeed take the Baden president. But we'll have to see, because he's missing a few, I think 7 mark to open it. Charlie sighs a sigh of relief, because he didn't need to worry about that anymore. The next company that will be offered is the Württemberg. But the question, of course, is, does Bob want to open it? That's the same thought process as before. He will now have the presidency, but is he really opening it right now? Is not clear to anybody, maybe not even to Bob at this moment. So the other option now, of course, is that the Prussia president, or the Prussia 10% shares, are now available, which is a very early situation for this to happen. And these papers do not pay. And Charlie doesn't have an interest in that, because obviously Alice already is the de facto president with 10, 20, 35%. So he will pass. Alice has the same thought process and will pass as well. Now Bob needs to sell a paper, and of course he cannot afford to sell the Bavaria, so he will sell Saxony to open it. This puts Charlie in a difficult position, because he really wants the Saxony, but 428 is just enough to open the Württemberg, so he will do that. Alice will pick up that Saxony for the moment, and Charlie will open Württemberg. In many games, this situation is not quite as linear or predictable as I pretend here, because there are other thoughts. And Alice has the thought of opening as many companies as possible, because she wants the Prussia operating as fast as possible. This is the moment where she can influence that, but she knows that she's earning quite well, and therefore the other Bob and Charlie did want to open their respective companies, so she didn't need to help. In some games she actually has to support that a little bit by buying one of these two companies as well, so that she makes sure that the Baden and Württemberg actually open. In this situation she really has no choice. She will buy the Hessen presidency. Bob will pick up a 60% of her zone. Charlie will pass, and Alice will open the Hessen, but of course cannot do that. So she will slowly drop papers. The question is, does she want to sell Bavaria or Saxony? And even if the Saxony has a higher income, the Bavaria is strategically better paper, because of course as long as Bob doesn't have 60% he cannot nationalize them, and therefore as Alice at the moment at least sits on the 50%. And now you might wonder, Alice has put herself of course in a dangerous situation, because she is co-shareholder with Bob of a company that has a 3-train 165, which doesn't look exciting at the moment, but it is the Bavaria, and the Bavaria will win with a high share value, and therefore usually this is a situation in which Alice will be very happy, pass and keep going. And even if Bob would decide to sell and dump the presidency, this would be in the long run a positive for Alice. Right, we enter the next operating round. We play 2 operating rounds now, and the M1 has now finally hit 2 good routes and will upgrade and go for more. M2 has nothing to do anymore, so it will do a very long-term project and connecting to the Hessen. M3 wants to be part of the west of the map and is connecting itself. M4 knows that the Baden is coming, so it will make everything perfect for the Baden to arrive. So it could, for example, build a straight here. M5 wants to continue the second connection to Hamburg. Bavaria has 2 concerns now. One is to go obviously as much as possible, but the second concern is the Baden. And don't forget, it's got the Pfalzbahn, so it can lay an extra tile now. So we want to build it as ideal for the Baden as possible. And it will lay the Baden tile in a way that is not so good for the Württemberg. Now the Baden must decide, and is obviously prepared for the west side. Saxony shows her full potential now by going 310, with finally the connection to Hamburg finished, and it's going 3 trains really well. And it can decide now if it wants the first 3+3 train as well. Every player at this stage will think, when will the first 4 enter the game, because that is the next phase. Considerations here are who is having the most 2 trains that are immediately rusted, who has an interest that the Prussia opens as early as possible, who's got the money, of course, and who can delay the game by not buying 3+3 trains, because the 3+3 will obviously not last to the end of the game. So buying a dying log train is potentially not a good idea. The Saxony president, Charlie, therefore decides that he does not need to buy another train. Baden has a fully functioning connection right up to Düsseldorf, which is brilliant, and is going to build immediately for the later future. Put a marker into Düsseldorf. This is probably one of the best markers on the map, and now it needs 2 trains. Baden can and should buy a 3+3 train, but it needs to also empty the other company so that they have spaces, so that the minor companies can empty their holdings. So what Bob did very cleverly is put the 2+2 into the M4, because if the 4 train is bought now, the 1 will be empty, can buy the 2+2, and the 4 can buy one of the trains from the Bavaria, probably the 2+2, and then all of the money ends up in the Bavaria. So this is a good situation. There's nothing else to do. Nürnberg is always struggling to escape her prison. It cannot do very much, and it has no additional powers, so there's nothing to do other than to hope and pray that the others will be helpful. Train buying here is one of the most difficult decisions in the game. If Charlie now buys the 3+3 train, then the Hessen by Alice will almost certainly buy the 3+3 train and will enable the Prussia to open very early by either the M2 or the M3 buying the 4 train. It is a big question if that is something that Charlie wants, and therefore the other option is, of course, to just simply buy a 3 train from the Saxony and hope to avoid by having to buy a 3+3 at all. The money here needs to be calculated carefully, because the Saxony has potentially the option to buy 2 4 trains, and so therefore he will decide to buy it for a lot of money. And remember, the Württemberg down here doesn't need a large train, but it should be a stable train, so the 3 train would go for a large number, and I would choose 360 because it leaves enough money for a potential marker later on. Alice sitting in a very nicely made bed. There's only good options here of what to do. A traditional option at this situation is to go with a direct connection between Nürnberg and Frankfurt, avoiding the small marker, the small town. It does not need to set a token, maybe not ever in this game, and it obviously wants to open the Prussia as soon as possible, so it's definitely going to buy the first of the 2 3+3 trains, and it wants to also enable the M2 to buy the second one in order to open up the 4 train to make it attractive enough for others to buy this train. We join the game at the M2. The M2 still wants to connect to the Hessen and builds this. Only got 1 train, but as I said, is really interested in that the 4 train is coming, so it will buy the 3+3 from the bank. So Alice now has a disadvantage of owning 2 3+3 trains. On the other hand, they might run for a long time. So this is a mixed blessing. Alice doesn't need to worry about trains, so she will just keep the trains as they are. Charlie needs to start thinking how to get the money out of this minor companies, so he will push all of the money together in the M5. Bayern would love to buy a 4 train, but it has no slot and had no ability to generate one. That is not true. Could have generated it via the Baden. That was an error. I'm not perfect. There will be small errors or large errors in this game as usual. No game is ever perfect. So Saxony made another error, because Saxony should have had 720 in order to buy 4 trains, as it was hoping for earlier, but it hasn't got that, and therefore has a decision to make whether to withhold. But in fact, that's not quite true, because the first 4 train will reduce the train limit to 3 anyway, so therefore the decision is easy. Pay and buy the 4 train, which now opens the next phase of the game, the Prussia. Alice is asked whether she wants to open the Prussia right now, but she doesn't have to, because the Prussia won't operate until the next operation round, so she will be asked again 2 times in fact, and so she says no for the moment. And that concludes Saxony. So now is a good time to start thinking about closing the Ostbayern, because of the certificate slot. And the Baden is also optimistically building towards Hamburg. This might become an important connection later on in the game. It's got a fantastic track for the 3+3, of course, but it wants to be better, but it hasn't got the money to do very much. But of course it will buy the 2+2. No, it will not. It will just carry on. Nürnberg connects itself and is therefore in the net, which is very helpful. It might panic now and lay a token, but it doesn't have to. Instead, it will just pay out. And buy the 2+2 from the Saxony. No, the 3 from the Saxony for all its money. The next round will be a stock round, so there will be money coming into the middle companies. The Hesse has not much to do, so it will build towards Nürnberg for a future connection. It's got a very good 3+3. And Alice does not need to worry about the minor companies and just finishes the go. So, beginning of the next stock round, no, beginning of the next operating round, Alice decides to start the Prussia, of course, and now is asked which of the other companies, of her minor companies, she wants to exchange. The Prussia has a 3+3, which will get in the area of 15 to 16 income per 10% share. All of her companies actually generate more at the moment, so there's no real incentive for her to exchange anything else. However, she only has 10% of the Prussia director, so everybody else who's exchanging more now will be overbuying her, and therefore she needs to have at least 15%. And therefore she will choose to exchange the 3, which gives her definitely the presidency. Bob doesn't have an incentive to exchange because he needs to get the money out of the M1 and M4. And neither has Charlie. We're entering the next stock round, and there's a lot of money now. 750, 760, 640. So Charlie, despite a good running Saxony, has had the least success in this round. Strategically now, it is important to think what are good share values. And at this stage, because nobody has bought Prussia yet, everybody is very keen on doing this. So the first round, especially Alice, is very keen on purchasing a Prussia share. And Charlie still has enough finances to buy the next one. So at this stage, it is a good idea to purchase your own company, but it is also a good idea to suppress the share values of the others. So Alice doesn't want to open the 20% share to Bob, so she will sell her 10% share and instead get a 60% Hessen share. The last paper in these companies is a double paper, and very often players will purchase these double papers because they are very attractive. They almost always get nationalized, which gives a simple cash boost to the owner. Now this, of course, is a very interesting and very important situation in the game again, because the last Hessen share would open up the director of the Mecklenburg-Schwerin, and nobody wants to deliberately buy this paper unless it has a huge advantage. So Bob will certainly not do that. So he will think what else he can do with this 438 money. He would love to nationalize Bavaria, but he only got 50% and not 60% for that. So he will just buy what else is there. Charlie hasn't got any money anymore anyway. He just buys whatever is possible. Alice has a higher interest and incentive to buy the last one, but why should she do that? There's still enough papers that she can buy that are very powerful at the moment. Charlie has an interest of actually purchasing the 80% Saxony, because then he gets another space, but he has not the money for it. Generating that money is not easy, so we'll actually pass and think he will do that in the next round. Bob will nationalize last Baden. Now he gets 100% and is safe. And Charlie now has enough money to nationalize one of these Saxonies that are still out there. So he chooses Bob to do that, because he hopes that Bob will use the money to buy the last Hessen, so that he then will get access to the Mecklenburg. But Bob will not do him that favor, instead chooses to pass. So now it's time again to think about exchanging the papers. And with 2 trains, Prussia actually has the potential to earn a lot of money, so Alice will decide to exchange. Situation hasn't changed for Bob or Charlie, so they will not exchange. Right, M1 will start, and now there's really everything is built. Continue the connection to Hamburg. Now it needs to buy a train, of course, and it will buy the 2+ train from the M4 to get all of the money into one company. M4 has a go immediately, and now the question really is, does it want to buy the 4 train, which is safe, but then it leaves, how much is it, 45 mark for the Prussia, or does it buy the 2+ train from the Bavaria, and then the Bavaria can buy the 4 train. However, Prussia will be in between, so it can buy the 2 trains, meaning that the Bavaria might not be able to buy the 4 train. So in that case, we rather buy the 2+ train and do not worry about it any longer. The M5 carries on building a second connection to Hamburg, and will buy 2+ train from the Saxony. And the M6 carries on with that, and is the last company that actually has a train of the minor companies. Right, Prussia's first go. Prussia's incentive at this time in the game is to build the largest network, but it's got 5 markers on the game, so it will be able to go everywhere. So the actual best thing that Alice can do, especially since she has not 100% of the shares, not even close, is to go and improve her other company, the Hesse, as much as possible. And for the Hesse, it's actually good to have the second connection out of Hamburg, out of Frankfurt. There's no need at this stage to lay a marker. It can become strategically very important later on to block, for example, Leipzig, but not in this game. And now it can buy as many train as it like, because it's got the money. Saxony has the chance to buy the 5 train and will do so. That immediately tidies up the board. Prussia is forced to discard a 3 train. And it cannot do anything else. So now it's brown, and from here on the game will calm down. So the first tile that the Baden might build would be itself. And it wants to give the Bavaria the ability to buy the next train. In fact, it will pay out and buy the 4+ train from the Bavaria. So that the Bavaria can buy a next train. So, Württemberg is in the net and is very happy to lay a token somewhere where it is useful and where it can go its 2 trains. Hesse could do something funny and lay a marker into Berlin, which is expensive, but would scupper the Mecklenburg. And the second company for Alice is of course the Prussia, and therefore this might not be a stupid idea, even if it means paying a lot of money, because now she can worry about Berlin with 2 companies, which is strategically a good situation, and of course is the best marker in the game. However, we need to generate more income here, and so she will definitely buy one of the 4 trains from the Prussia for everything apart from 1. Second operating round, this is not a question. We're going to build Berlin and place no token. Stock round. We take stock. Everybody has around the same amount of money. However, Alice has no certificate spaces anymore. Bob can buy 3. Charlie can buy 3. Now Alice is really keen on getting 80% of Hessen because she gets another space, and she's already, because she is full and has good shares, she doesn't have a high interest in getting the Mecklenburg, so she will do that. Will therefore sell one of the Württemberg, although it's a double share, but it will at least drop the price, and will buy the last Mecklenburg. This is an easy decision for Bob to make. And an easy decision for Charlie to make. Alice is not doing anything at the moment because she's waiting for Prussia papers to come her way, which will happen eventually, because Bob and Charlie need to get as much money as possible into Mecklenburg and Oldenburg in order to buy good trains. So Charlie is full, and indeed starts selling 5% shares of the Prussia, also because it of course affects the course at this stage. Alice will pick this up, waiting to get 55% eventually, because if she does, she can start nationalizing Prussia, which is the difference between Prussia being a very, very strong or just an average company. And here it comes. But what is she going to sell for that? Well, the answer at the moment is a Hessen, and can pick up the 55%. Now this is a good question. Does she want to start nationalizing? She's got the money. She's got not the certificates, so therefore this might be the moment for her to actually finally say goodbye to the Bavaria or the Saxony. This is a hard choice. At this stage she's going to sell the Saxony, and she's not going to pick up the 5% from the pool, but she's going to nationalize 10% share from Bob. This is a very good paper. Everybody wants that at the moment. Same again. Now this is an interesting situation because she's still 75. She really would like to get, of course, A, the paper from the pool, and B, 80%. So this might be the stage where she finally decides to open up the space so that she can get her 80% Prussia paper. In fact, she might instead nationalize Bob's 10% paper. Now Bob has the opportunity finally to get 60% Bavaria the first time in the game. And Charlie suddenly has a space. Alice now has the intention to get 100% Prussia. Bob has the same intention, getting 80% of the Bavaria, but he's struggling because he's missing one spot. Let's see what he's doing. Charlie, no need to do anything, because he knows that Alice will nationalize his last Prussia. Now Bob has to bite the bullet, sell one of his own certificates to get 80% Bavaria. And Charlie can pick up all of the pieces, 100% Saxony, and with the only paper that Alice can buy here is a Baden. The only paper that Bob can buy is Bavaria. And now Bob decides to finish the round. Okay. Prussia has a lot to do. First thing is the second connection to Hamburg. Hamburg is good for everyone, but Charlie benefits because he can go with 2 trains there, so he bites the bullet and pays for the 50. Baden is an incredibly powerful company. He's got the intention to improve the Mecklenburg and will think at this stage where the marker for the Mecklenburg will go. It might go here, or we might decide to make Hanover a valuable interim stop. But Meg is the weakest company because it's only got 2-3 trains. It will need a better train very soon. Mecklenburg would really like to lay a marker here, but can't. So it decides the second best for the future might well be Hanover, which is not very strong yet, but it can become very powerful in due course. Now it can buy the 5+5, which is a very attractive train. and it will buy the 3 train from the Bavaria in order to generate 2 trains in there. Oldenburg decides to join the Mecklenburg and to kill the 3 trains. It will kill Württemberg's 3 trains, so an alternative is to buy the 3 train first for 270, and then it for 230, of course, so that the Württemberg will not drop in its share value. Prussia decides to buy the 4 train. And Bavaria will now buy the 5+ train, because it got the routes and the possibility to use them. Hessen decides to withhold, which allows him to buy the 6th train, because the Württemberg, which comes next, will fall. Which allows the MS to buy the first 3+ train. And now all of the important connections are built. So from here on, the game will end relatively quickly. Last stock round. Charlie has a space. No. Charlie will, of course. Charlie will pass. This is quick because everybody is full now. And all of the major connections are built. I will shortcut this now and play very quickly to the end, because I don't believe that there are big changes still possible with building. If you disagree, drop me a line. That means the bank is broken in this operating round. We've finished the round to the end. And we'll have a look at the result. In fact, I will look at the absolute value. And let's see what happens. At the very beginning, this is not very exciting. The first interesting move happened at the beginning of the first green round when the Saxony was opened, and at that stage Alice is in the lead, which is part because of her Prussia papers, but that's not really something that can hold on for the rest of the game. But interestingly, Alice keeps her lead right up to the mid-game. Charlie Saxony should make a difference here, but at this stage, briefly Bob was in the lead. This is the round where Alice nationalizes the Prussia, which cost her a lot of money, but will immediately pay off because they rise in value and have very good trends. So Alice looks as if she has won, but there was one point where Bob actually overtook her at the very end. And indeed, Bob pipped Alice into second place. Charlie is a respectable third with 88%. Didn't have a chance throughout the game since the beginning, probably because the Saxony was not as well as it should have been, because the 2 and 3 built together at the very beginning of the game. But that Bob overtook Alice in the very last round is surprising. What an interesting game.